I've started talking to people who were in a religion
Sure.
or a belief. It could be not necessarily a religion. It could be just entrenched in a belief,
Sure.
and they were able to extricate themselves from that belief.
Sure.
And I do this for a few reasons. One, I think it's helpful for others
Yeah.
because you've been there,
Absolutely.
and it's kind of cool or interesting to hear the process, the journey, and how it happened. And also, I'm really just part of it is just my natural interest in the sense that I am fascinated about how some people,
Sure.
are able to remove themselves from a strong belief system while others seem to have more difficulty doing that.
Sure.
And I'm really trying to get my head around why that is. What's the secret sauce there that that's at play? And have some thoughts about it, but I'm more interested in what your thoughts are about it.
Sure.
Yeah, maybe we start there.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, it's good to see you, David, and just this is not the first time we're meeting. We've hung out a few times. We've had some nice lunches together in town,
Yeah.
and I've enjoyed hanging out with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I was really excited to be able to drop out down here and join in on this, and I've absolutely enjoyed our lunches as well.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. This
I'm trying to remember maybe we got
I think Discord. I
it was
think is how we
Discord.
first initially
Yeah,
linked up.
that's right. Did you know that I was in town, or how did it work? I'm just trying to remember.
You posted your radio station uh, program on one of the
Yeah,
things, or it might have been Reddit.
on Reddit.
Yeah, surprisingly.
Yeah.
And I was listening to your radio station, and they're like, "Oh yeah, here in Hillsboro." I'm like, "Oh wow,
Oh, that's what it is. Okay, yeah. That's interesting because sometimes people reach out um, and I'm just like to meet people who are in SE and like yourself, and I think it's awesome.
absolutely,
But we're not doing SE today, so maybe we can start from the beginning.
sure."
So I presume you grew up in a religious
I did.
household. Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up primarily with my dad, and he was very much religious. He was like very much into Christianity specifically, and he was not necessarily someone who was like active in the church, but he wanted me to go all the time. And every vacation Bible school in the world that popped up, he dropped me off at. And so I've been to 8 million different churches, and it was pretty much assumed my entire life that that's something that I'm going to be a part of and something I'm going to be like almost excel in. Like he was kind of, I think he was hoping for me to work in the church one day.
So, like, what sect was it that you were raised in,
I mean,
or was it?
it's Baptist is the
Baptist.
simplest answer. Yeah.
So you were raised in a Baptist home, and
Yeah.
you had a father
Mm-hmm.
who was into baptism himself and his religion,
Yeah.
and he would really wanted you to be in your religion, in the same religion, and you went to Bible study,
Yeah, million
camp
Bible
and,
studies, churches,
yeah,
camps,
churches,
any church
yeah.
that picked me up from the house, he'd be go for it.
So what I'm kind of curious, like, what he just was it a thought of what he wanted you to specifically gain from doing this, or is
I
it?
mean, it's the whole world to him and people
I see.
who believe it. I mean, it's like these are
is
people
life.
you trust. These are people you can who are going to teach kids to do the right thing. It's going to keep them out of trouble. I mean, it's all sorts of good intentions in all regards. I have no ill will towards my dad in that.
Oh yeah. And your mom was the same way, or is it?
My mom wasn't really religious growing up, and they split ways when I was young, and she ended up moving to a different state. I'd see her like during her summers and stuff, but she wasn't really religious at that time.
Okay.
She's more so now, which is fun, but
Yeah. Okay, so you grew up in a religious household, mostly with your dad.
yeah,
And do you have siblings, or
not really. Just
you and
a
your
bunch
dad?
of friends and daycares.
Yeah. Okay. So, so you
Half
grew up
siblings.
half sibling.
Yeah,
Let's see.
they went with them.
So you grew up in a religious household, and I presume you're not really questioning it that much at this point, or
No, I was all in.
Yeah.
And I mean, I enjoyed a lot of it in a lot of regard. I made a lot of friends at churches and stuff like that. And whenever I became old enough to want to read books on my own. Like I was going to Barnes and Noble and sitting there reading books about it, and really trying to expand my knowledge. I was fascinated by trying to. It was like I've always loved people. I've always loved caring about people, how they view life, how they feel value, how they mourn. All these things are very important to me always. I don't know why. And it was like the more I was like studying, like I don't know, like Christian history, and I was reading all these like books that were like really poetic about, how this is we're sacrificing our lives to build life for people, and it really.
So you go to Barnes and Noble and you read mostly Christian related.
Yeah,
Okay,
back
yeah,
when I was in like middle high school.
that's pretty good because you couldn't get me to read a book.
I was waiting for the mall to open so I could go flirt with girls. So
Yeah, I definitely spent a lot of time at malls, but I think I was didn't flirting with girls either. I think I was playing asteroids, but
oh yeah.
yeah. So you're growing up and you're in a religious household, and even on your free time when you're going to malls, you're like reading Christian books, and so you're really into it. And if I remember your story correctly, it seems then you went to attended a Christian college.
I did. Yep. I had pretty intention to work in some kind of church or nonprofit that was Christian related, and I studied religious studies and discipleship in undergrad, and again fascinated by a lot of the aspects of how to reach people, how to interact with people, the history of people doing some good things. But somewhere in there, in the middle of that, I started reading so much about it that it started to overlap in ways that it was hard to reconcile, and it was like it was a slow acceptance, but over time I had to I started realizing that, well, maybe I don't believe this, but I still believe this. Well, maybe I don't believe this too, but I still got this.
So what started that initial? You said you had to reconcile, but through your life up to that point, there was nothing for you to reconcile. It seemed like you were fine with your beliefs, and it wasn't really challenging you in any. There was no cognitive dissonance in that sense.
Sure.
What do you remember? Like what started it off, or what? I mean, maybe there's.
I mean, if I dig really deep, I can think about like kind of being in a youth group in high school, and I worked really extensively with my youth group. I did an internship under a youth pastor. So I knew the nuts and bolts, like the inner workings of how the programs are ran. I was a worship leader playing guitar, and so it was like once you kind of get behind the curtain a little bit and see the stage production, it kind of starts to feel a little less organic if you realize that was
just seeing how the sausage was made. And,
exactly, yeah. And it wasn't necessarily that people aren't being genuine. I don't. My intention is not to say that people aren't being genuine,
sure.
but that was one of my initial thoughts. I think that started making me think about stuff. It was how it's a bit processed. I don't know how to describe it now. Like a lot of my spiritual experiences were very core. What's the word? I realized that a lot of big emotional moments in my life were very much part of a production, such as like big Christian concert things and swelling music, and
something about the production element rubbed you.
It started rubbing me the wrong way, and so I'm trying to get down to the grassroots.
But you said the people were genuine, but something about the production was not.
I mean, it's obviously a show, and for a lot of the stuff, especially when you get into more like modern services and stuff. I mean, you've got literal light technicians, and it's a play. I mean, it's
a play designed to what?
To facilitate a sense of awe, or a sense of reflection, a sense of.
So you're feeling you're being manipulated?
Manipulating is an accurate word, but has a negative context.
Okay, don't mean to say that then.
Sure.
So I'm really just trying to understand what it is. not manipulated, but you thought,
So I started to reflect back on the fact that I'm not. It almost feels like I need another person around to experience God or something. I don't know how to describe it. I mean, I pray all the time, and I felt like
you need another person, that you needed another person around to experience God, and then when you were not there, you didn't experience God. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know if I'm saying that.
Okay, and I don't want to
No,
put
I
words in your mouth.
understand. No,
I'm really just trying to
I'm
understand.
processing this. I'm processing this as I go.
Yeah.
Because right now I'm literally just shooting from the hip on some thoughts that I had never really processed before.
Yeah.
Whenever I usually tell people about leaving the faith, it's usually theological theory of, this, and this, and this.
No, and I get that, and that's has its place too. But I really, I'm just very interested and fascinated, like that moment, whether it's
Yeah.
a gradual thing or an aha, and if it is an aha, what was it, and what is the piece? What
Yeah.
and I know you might not have the answers. And
Sure.
I'm not trying to. Definitely not supposed
No,
to be a gotcha
hear you.
conversation.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So all that's kind of putting a little bit weird taste in my mouth, and I go to college, and
Something's not settling right, and we'll get back to that.
Yeah.
But it's just not. It's not your sense of what reality is, whatever that was.
yeah,
That was not jiving.
yeah, it felt as though I had to posture myself in a particular way to be a part of that or something. I don't know, to really experience it, and it's
You had
like
to force yourself.
force yourself is a way to phrase it, but it's more like I dated this girl in high school who I brought to church with me, and she didn't want to do the Christian calisthenics, so to speak. Like, she didn't want to stand up whenever stand
She
up
didn't
to
want to
sing.
do it. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and stuff like that. And then trying to convince her to do it made me realize, well, holy crap, I just do a lot of this stuff without thinking about it.
She was questioning why you were doing certain things,
Yeah,
and made you, maybe that's part of it, and made you question some of it.
yeah.
Okay.
But then, I mean, I still continued on for many years, and I made it all the way through undergrad pretty much.
Yeah.
For the most part, maybe even my senior year.
What'd you study then?
I was religious studies, discipleship, psychology, and sociology minors.
So you're going to be a pastor?
I was going to work in a pastor, youth pastor, worship leader, nonprofit, something like that. I did an internship with a Christian university, Christian organization, nonprofit.
So whatever it is, it's growing in college. It's this sense.
I used it the best I could at the time. I don't like that phrase. All right. So, going through it, I'm learning, I'm studying, and I'm trying to teach it. I'm running a little college group, and I'm sitting here trying to do research, trying to say here's a nice parallel for reality. I mean, here's the winter solstice, and it's the darkest night of the year, and then after the winter solstice is the first day of spring. Yeah, some metaphor, something. I don't know.
Okay.
And it's not particularly relevant. I'm just saying the kind of stuff I was thinking about all the time. Trying to find metaphors and trying to find history to make practical things to inspire people. And I ran into some questions I ran into, stuff like, is the Garden of Eden a literal story in the Bible? And a lot of people don't believe it's a literal story. A lot of people believe it's just a metaphor that was used for folklore, basically to try to teach a moral lesson to the communities around them.
So while in school, you started questioning some of the stories in the Bible, whether they were literal or whether they're meant to be an allegory or something.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. And it's okay, I think I accepted that. I think it's just an allegory because, I mean, it just really doesn't make sense for two people to to be the only people around. They have kids, and then where do the other kids come from? Where do the rest of the people come from? It's pretty gross to think about.
So your sense of logic or rationality wasn't matching up
Yeah.
with that.
But it was fine at the time because, ultimately what I cared about was Jesus. What I cared about was the message of loving your enemies, the message of a transformed world through forgiveness and new systems.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
How do you know things, and is it the way you've always gone about knowing things? Do you have a rational, logical sense about you? Is that how you've always known things, or maybe not? Or is it a, spiritual, what's described to me as spiritual, or feeling, or sense, or faith? Or how have,
Sure.
Yeah.
I tend to take pretty quick assessments and make actions based on what I find usually pretty quickly and pretty strongly but don't think about it much afterwards.
Say it again.
I like to think I'm super logical. I might be logical on a quick, fast thought,
Okay.
but I often can be not methodological, and I can be emotionally charged, I think.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. I didn't mean to stop you. So,
Yeah.
so
think
we're
about
so
that.
we're in college, and
Yeah.
so things aren't driving right.
Adam and Eve, not literal, not. So
Okay.
then you got that story has the original sin, and so do you believe that the original sin is allegory or something real, or like the sin basically?
Yeah.
And so it's like, if there's no Adam and Eve, there's no original sin. Does that mean that Jesus died for something that's not original sin?
So you're starting from this one part, like Adam and Eve. It doesn't seem like the two of them existed as two people
Yeah.
on Earth, and from there, spokes came out of the wheel.
Yeah, it started. I started running into some barriers, especially between Adam and Eve, Jesus, the devil, and heaven. Those are the ones that all started connected. Basically, it was. I started questioning stuff like, there's the story of Satan, and some people believe that Satan is just not a literal person. Some people believe he's a literal person and he's basically a second god, but he's evil.
So you didn't think that there was a entity
Yeah.
called Satan, and okay.
Yeah, it's like, is there a entity that is literally at all places at all times just trying to whisper in your ear to do bad things?
Gotcha.
And if so, like, does that mean he has free will?
So that didn't So that didn't jive with your sense of reality, whatever. Right. Okay.
And
Gotcha.
I started struggling with the concept of free will in Christianity, because, like, does Satan have free will to not tempt people or whatever?
Right.
Can you get to heaven and still have free will to leave, like the story of Satan and Lucifer
Yeah.
and the angels that got cast down?
Right.
So if you have that opportunity to do that,
Okay.
let's say you can still leave when you're up there, or you can still rebel, or whatever the word is.
The things weren't making sense.
Yeah.
Were you talking to anybody about this at the time? Were you is just keeping this to yourself, or is it?
Maybe with some friends, but
I could see it being difficult to talk about in a religious school. That
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I talked to some professors after I'd already kind of made up my mind,
Okay.
and they didn't really want to go down the rabbit hole with me.
Didn't want to do that. Okay.
Yeah, they were more like, I think you're thinking too much, basically. That's what they told my wife.
Don't think about
One
it.
of them that we really respected, and we were very frustrated that was their answer as a professor. I think you're thinking too much.
Don't think about it. All right. So by the time you left college, where were you on this?
Well, I graduated and I was interviewing to be a worship leader at a place, and I got up on stage and started singing, and I was like, "Well, I can't do this. This just feels not
Wow.
real. I feel like I'm faking this."
Wow.
And that was one of the big moments I remember.
Was there okay? So you can trace it down to that moment.
Yeah.
And did you at that point keep it to yourself? Were you talking about this with your wife or
Yeah, coincidentally, my wife was going through a similar deconstruction.
and you knew this at the time?
We were not dating well,
I see.
we started dating, and then we both hit like a pinnacle point at which we had to talk to each other about it.
Wow.
And she was afraid I was going to leave her.
Wow. Okay.
And,
Yeah.
but it was such a great coincidence that we
Yeah.
both were hitting that point.
So you had each other to rely on.
We
which
did.
I could see that being helpful.
Yeah.
And not making it as difficult to make that change.
Yeah.
But how was it with other friends and family?
Yeah, we ended up going around telling the people close to us and our friends and family. My parents, I don't think they believed me or think it was a phase or something. And I said something like, "Yeah, I'm still trying to figure it out." And like my dad like latched to that, like
Right.
he latched onto that, and he almost pretends that conversation never happened.
Okay.
Yeah,
So you
so-
really only had kind of one conversation with him, and then that was that.
Yeah, I mean every once in a while he's like,
How long ago are we talking about here?
This is years at this point.
Wow. Okay.
And every once in a while he'll talk about like, yeah, you gonna take your kids to church, and
Okay.
and it's like, but
Right.
my dad's a good guy. I'm not trying to
Yeah.
like burn him in this
Sure.
way.
Sure. But it's just interesting that I've talked to other people that once this decision is made, then there's certain conversations that can't be had or not had as.
Yeah.
And have you ever considered trying a street epistemology conversation with him, or is that something that's off the table right now?
Every once in a while he'll come and help babysit my kids, and we've had some late night conversations, but never a formal sit down like that. And honestly, I don't know. I don't know if I even want him to see this, because it's like
Yeah.
it works for him. Like for the most part, it doesn't have that much toxic behavior in him.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's worth like
Why introduce extra
strife
in
and
a relationship? I
and just in
understand
his
that.
life, because
Yeah.
it was miserable deconstructing. Like it was. I went through depression through it. Like it was difficult, because I had to reinvent my entire self.
What was the hardest part about it, would you say?
It's I had to I went from I'm destined for great things. I've got an advocate for me. The opportunity is going to come at any moment. Like to all doors, always be aware that there's something working around you. To all right,
It was like a life safety net.
yeah, it was quite a safety net. It was a sense of direction. It was a purpose, and I had to make a new one. I had to find new meaning in life. I had to find new purpose, and a lot of my values didn't change. Honestly, like I said, I've always cared about people. I've always cared about people feeling like they matter. And
You're the same person, but you didn't. The difference is there was not some entity
yeah,
in guiding you, and there's this greater thing for you specifically that you needed to do. Okay.
yeah, and that was tough. I mean, you told your whole life. I mean, it's just it's almost feels like getting divorced or cheated on or something. I don't know. It's like everything that you thought was true was like a lie, and then every positive association has a little bit of a burn to it.
Yeah.
So I don't know,
But you're still fundamentally the same person, and you're doing good things, and
trying.
And like we all do.
Yeah, probably cuss more now.
Right. Well, that's the worst thing, right?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you regret it?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
It was a lot easier back then. I mean, I had less responsibility. I had easier friendship gathering. I had something to do every week,
You
multiple
have less
times.
sense of community.
Yeah, I mean, I had to burn a certain amount of community because, I mean, I could go to church still, but I'd have to, like, shut up. I have to keep my mouth shut the whole time and not ask questions and pretend and have to go through some emotions that I know don't feel real for me. And, I mean, it's a certain amount of transaction there. I mean, it's people go and they expect people to perform a certain amount, like what they do with everything. You go to a game. I mean, you're expected to like cheer. You go to I can't think of any good, but it's everything's a performance. I mean, we all act a certain way when we go in certain stores, certain restaurants. I mean, that's fine. It's just a performance I don't want to make.
So how many years has this been?
Probably 6, 7. At this point, I don't even know.
Okay.
It's getting further away.
My sense is that you've overcome quite a bit, and you went through a period of depression, and you're on the other side, and you're doing well. And so I'm not trying to take that from you, but I think what I'm thinking is that I get the sense that you're still going through it.
It's unfortunate, but I mean, I still think about this stuff all the time. I'm still watching content about theology and people discussing this kind of stuff. I mean, a lot of my friends, like, what I think about all the time is there a string of words, a phrasing that can bring somebody to the point at which they aren't bound to this, but it doesn't have to rip off of them. It doesn't pull the skin when it comes off.
There were definite benefits from being in the religion. There was community, and then there was the sense of purpose that it gave you, and a sense of destiny maybe, and
Sure.
And those were you saw as positive things in your life, and unfortunately you saw them as not the fundamental basics of the religion. You saw them as not true, and no matter how much you enjoyed or liked or appreciated or benefited from this extra stuff,
Sure.
the basis of it you didn't see matching with reality, so you couldn't believe a belief that you couldn't believe.
Yeah. And it's the toothpaste is out of the tube, so to speak.
Yeah.
They couldn't get it back in. And yeah. And I got a lot of friends who are still religious and family and stuff like that. And I don't know if I want some people to have to go through this. It's because, I mean, it's once you start looking back on some of the things that you kind of went through, how your behaviors escalated to more and more strange behavior, just because in context it was only this much more. But in reality, like, if you were to start right there, it's like way up here.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, pretty culty.
Yeah, that's something I think about, when I'm talking to people who have a strong faith, and they come talk to me, and we're talking, and we're doing street epistemology, and they're saying they're perfectly fine talking to me about this stuff, and they want to believe things true out of 7 out of 7, but I do think about that, the underpinnings of, when I do try to ask those questions, the underpinnings of this, if your belief was taken away, or not taken away, you've taken your own belief away.
Sure.
How would your life change? You'd be a better person, you'd be a worse person, and usually people tell me that they don't think they'd fundamentally change, but it seems like there are things that fundamentally change.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But to me, it's all about core values, and most of the time that gets whitewashed with phrases like, I mean, it's like, well, the Bible or Jesus is their core values.
Yeah.
But, I mean, there's a million different ways to interpret the Bible or Jesus' teachings, so it really comes down to what parts do you care about that Jesus or the Bible says. And then if those things are still applicable on a practical sense. I mean, if you strip that away, if you take away the dressing of attaching it to an authority, does it make sense outside of someone telling you that it's the best thing?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people just grow up saying, well, whatever the Bible says is the best thing because it's what the Bible says, and that's what God says, and He's the ultimate authority. You don't question it. And,
If I could give you a button,
yeah,
and if you press this button, you'd be the same person, but the difference is that you would be back to yourself in the sense that you were in high school, where you were all in, you believed it, you weren't questioning, and you had that sense of community, and you
Sure.
had that sense of awe, I think you mentioned, and your life is basically the same it is now, but you would have back to that sense and that back to that way of knowing things.
Sure.
Do you think you'd press that button?
Oops, sorry. I mean, probably. I mean, that's free knowledge, free experience.
You press that button?
If I'm the same as I am now, that's just adding. But
So you'd go back to believing the
I'm
belief.
pretty sure I'd figure it out the same way I am now eventually. But yeah, it'd be nice to pretend for a little bit. I mean,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I don't know. It's an interesting hypothetical because I don't know how I'd be the same person if I believe that anymore.
I get that. I do. I think it seems to boil down to that. I mean, you can't believe a belief that you can't believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't believe it. You don't believe it.
Yeah.
And I mean,
But I sympathize with a lot of people who do, mainly because I can align myself with the values that are independent of that, if that makes sense. And I think that some people, I mean, we build mental barriers to kind of protect ourselves from having to hit cognitive dissonance, to hit that stage of that gut feeling where everything feels awful and like, oh man, it's shaking our foundations of things. I mean, we build mental barriers to prevent those kind of things from happening, so we don't just accidentally see a picture of something and fall over.
we stop ourselves from going the road
Yeah.
you took.
Yeah.
We have guardrails in place
Mm-hmm.
where when we get too close to the guardrails, something
start taking
happens,
shortcuts.
pushes us back into
Yeah.
the belief. So we're all in line with the belief, and
Yeah.
we're in line with our families and our communities and our friends, and
Yeah.
we're on the why you? Why? What was it about you? You had friends. You went to school with people. I mean, what you're telling me, my assumption is that it is not the norm. It is the outlier.
Yeah, it is.
Why you?
I'm not sure. I think part of it was I was able to not live in a household that required it of me. That was a little easier. I mean, once I got out and moved to college, I mean, I know I went to a Christian school and stuff, but there was plenty of not Christian stuff. I didn't want to mess with it, even though I was literally playing at churches on Wednesdays, running a small group on Thursdays, running a Sunday school on Sunday. I was pretty jam packed, and then taking religious studies classes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, you're like in religious classes. You go to religious school. You're like,
But I mean,
it's not satisfying for me. It's not.
it's
I get to this point with other people in the conversation. It's like, and I think it's something about you specifically, but
I feel like people make, when we were talking about earlier, like the roadblocks or like the walls to prevent that. I think what we do is we don't actually get to the wall. We have detours in front of the wall that say, like, if this topic comes up, use this source, take you over here instead.
right, sure.
And- I think, thanks to a short attention span, I probably accidentally forgot the turn. I don't know.
Yeah. So we're saying something about you,
I don't know.
and we couldn't replicate this you know, because and I just it's the notion that if people are believing untrue things or beliefs that happen not to be true, it would be nice if they didn't believe them.
I honestly think, going back to this, I think I had the freedom to not believe it and not have to pretend, because I got out of the atmosphere that made me pretend. Like, one of my best friends went to the same programs I did, helped run the same Sunday school things as I did, helped run the same college ministry, played in the worship bands with me. Like, we literally had like the same schedule for like 2 years. Great guy. Absolutely respect this man. But he mostly ended up still in Christianity. And when I catch him on some days, he'll kind of admit, like, man, a lot of this just feels like bullshit. But at the same time, his wife's Christian, his family's Christian. So it's like he can't just
Yeah,
turn it. He can't just look at something else.
sure. It's part of more of an ingrained identity with him, I guess. At this point,
It is,
he couldn't just change the belief. He'd have to change other elements of his life. And
and he'd have to.
So how did you get involved in street epistemology, or just coming across it then?
I mean, I live on YouTube. Like, I just put YouTube videos on in the background every day.
Yeah.
Listen to stuff. I probably, I was watching a lot of. How'd that all start? I think one of these, like, atheist channels, something like Holy Kool-Aid, or one of these. What are the ones where they draw drawings and stuff? But
I'm sure.
either way, Non-Stamp Collector is it's an old one. That led to the Atheist Experience call-in show, and I was fascinated by that show because I was like, okay, here we go. Let's give it a fair shot. Let people talk it out.
Okay.
And it was usually very weak opponents calling into the show, and I was very frustrated by that. But then after a while, I was like, are these people really weak? Or is that just the actual ideas?
Right. I see.
And that was getting frustrating. And then at some point, street epistemology popped up, and I fell in love with street epistemology. Because it wasn't this brash, like, in your face, like, you're an idiot for thinking what you're thinking. No, it was like, look, we're here. Life is crazy. Let's try to talk about what we believe and why we believe it.
Yeah,
and
attracts me about it too. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I fell in love with, like, little Anthony Magnabosco's content, in which he was non-confrontational. He was asking people, giving them the chance to discuss their beliefs, and really just getting them to expand their thoughts, as opposed to saying, well, what about this? Or, this, that's wrong because of this.
Yeah.
It wasn't, that's wrong because of this. So if this was the case, how does that affect your belief? And let them discuss it. Now, obviously, about street epistemology. I mean, you're doing great with it. That's why I'm watching your videos and talking to you half the time now. So,
Yeah.
but I just fell in love with that, because it felt like people working together to talk about stuff. Because that's what I want. That's literally what I want to do. Is I want to find a way to help people actually interact, because we talk past each other all the time.
I'm with you. I want to step back from the brink that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is sort of a wonderful conversation, and I don't know what I expected, but I think it's just a very different conversation than I've had with other people. Not that it was better or worse, but I find it fascinating, but more importantly, I think I find it useful.
Yeah.
And I find it useful because people tell me these are helpful. That street epistemology is very helpful because of what you just described, but also hearing the journey you took is also helpful. I don't know if it gives people permission. I don't know if people identify with what you're going through and they see themselves and what you're going through. I don't know if it's like street epistemology in the sense that it helps the reflection, it helps the self-talk to yourself of like, why do I believe what? This is another way to kind of say, well, why do I believe what I believe?
Sure.
And street epistemology is just one way to do that, and and then hearing somebody else who you identify might be another way. But I'm really happy and I really am glad to know you. We've known each other for like, I guess, about a year now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I want to continue going and joining you for lunches and stuff, and hope we get to do that soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm really grateful for this interview. Like, I had not had to put my thoughts together in a presentation in a minute, so to speak. And so this has been a process of unpacking this, and I do appreciate this. Like,
Absolutely.
I do hope that people can hear this and see, like, because I mean, it gets scary whenever you unpack everything, you pull everything back, and there's just the void. It's like it went from everything is on purpose to nothing's on purpose.
Right.
But then eventually you'll come back to it's not that there's a purpose being given to us, but there's a purpose we get to make, and it's what
you're defining it.
We get to define it, and you go from what is it, like existential nihilism to absurdism, and it's like nothing matters to hey, nothing matters. Right. So let's care for each other.
Right. I see what you're saying. Like, we're on this earth for a short time. Let's, do something that let's help each other flourish in some way.
Yeah. Yeah, because everybody's struggling. Everybody's trying to figure it out. And it's exhausting, like trying to find a way to exist. I mean, we literally live in I'm starting to go off again, sorry, but
great.
we live in a society in which, like, everything's about performance. It used to have, like, just traditional roles. It was like, oh, you were a brother, you were a son, you worked at a steel mill, and, like, you provided for your family. And for the most part, you might be funny, or you might be smart, or you might be tough. Yeah. It was pretty simplified roles in society.
Right.
But now we're such a commodified society at which literally, like, our children have to learn to build a profitable identity to exist. They have to present themselves in a way that says, hey, I matter. I'm interesting enough to be paid attention to.
Yeah.
I know there's a million other things to look at. You can look at your phone. You can look at this. There's a million other people.
It is weird that way. Yeah, I don't know. Here I know I'm here saying it's weird away, and here I am. Here we are making content.
It is, absolutely.
But no, that is weird.
So I want to find a way to tell people they matter, like whether they perform or not.
Right. Well, thanks, David.
Absolutely.
We'll talk soon again.
Appreciate you. Yeah.